Good morning on the West Coast and good afternoon on the East Coast. Today is Wednesday, August 17th, the 229th day of the year, and I hope everyone is having a fantastic summer. I'm John Yarrington, CEO of the Performance-Driven Marketing Institute, a 501c6 not-for-profit trade association dedicated to protecting, promoting, and advancing the direct-to-consumer and direct response advertising industries. And on behalf of the entire PDMI team, it's my pleasure welcoming you back for yet another fun-filled and exciting episode of the PDMI Take 20. As a reminder, the PDMI Take 20 is a quick-hitting roundtable discussion led by industry experts on trending topics, all in 20 minutes or less. Today, we'll be joined by one of my favorite repeat guests, the man who knows a little bit about everything, Ron Hadler of Red Door Interactive, a PDMI member company. And we'll be talking about the state of data privacy, from the usage to best practices. However, before we get started, please allow me to do a little housekeeping. If you'd like to ask a question, and we encourage you to do so, please use your questions tab located in your control panel. Also, please note, you're welcome to ask questions throughout today's conversation, but we will hold all the replies to the end of today's discussion. Alrighty, folks. With that said, it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator. When he goes to Spain, he chases the bulls. He's the fearless Chris Foster. Chris is Vice President of New Business Development at Modern Postcard, a direct marketing agency located in Carlsbad, California. In addition to his day job, Chris teaches brand strategies at UCSD Extension courses, and he's the chairperson of the PDMI's Brand Response Council. As always, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much, and take it away.
Thank you, John, so much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you, Ron, for coming back onto the broadcast. We're so excited to have you here because, folks, we are doing a two-part series in our biannual data privacy discussion. The reason we have it biannually is things change pretty rapidly, and this is a really important topic for everyone in this industry. Today, we're going to talk about the changes from the perspective of marketing, advertising, consumer behavior, and devices. Google released news that their third-party Cookiegeddon won't descend on us until 2024, and that gives time for things like the privacy sandbox and fingerprinting to evolve. I will ask Ron maybe to explain what that means. But what does this actually mean for large brands like LiveRamp or just regular marketing and advertisers like us? Also, are advanced TV privacy policies going to change as the adoption of that channel increases? Will the Mac iOS ask to not track continue to erode ad deliverability? This discussion today is not about legality or regulations. It's about usages, best practice, and what to prepare your team for in the upcoming months and years with how you can target and track your digital marketing. And also we'll talk about consumers and organizations and what they're doing to increase their privacy habits and the impact that has on advertisers to target and connect. Again, we're so excited to have Ron here. And Ron, thank you so much for joining us. I have to start first with a stat. Estimated 80% of Apple iOS users globally have opted out of tracking for at least one app, according to Verizon, an ad tech firm Adjust. So with that being said, clearly that's a user behavior. How is that impacting the advertising space in real numbers?
Yeah, and that one app is generally Facebook, and so it's really affected, iOS has really affected Facebook. I think the number is somewhere in the 10 billion range as the amount of revenue that will decrease because of iOS, data privacy opt-out functionality that was implemented last year. So it's definitely having an effect with their ability to kind of track. They've done some implementations, Facebook, to kind of counteract that. They've put in their conversion API, and being able to implement that is one of the ways that you can kind of help get some of that underlying data that helps you tie your advertising to your conversions. We've definitely done some of that implementation at Red Door.
So I guess one of my follow-up questions on that would be, what are the implications, Ron, for Meta and kind of that larger business, not just Facebook?
Yeah, I mean, this is really something that's affecting almost every single brand out there that plays on the internet, right? And so the ability, and just going back to your original question of really cookies, I think a lot of advertisers were like literally partying when they heard that news that it was being pushed back another year, right? They didn't have to go through this rigmarole. They still get the data flowing in. They can tie advertising because they have third-party cookies to kind of tie all that data together. And I think that was a cheer. I'm truthfully a little disappointed that they pushed it out a year. This is coming no matter what. Third-party cookies are not very secure. Lots of data gets leaked. It's a problem. It needs to get removed. And Google, being the 800-pound gorilla in this space, is the one kind of holding on that, and kind of they're the ones dictating that. But in my personal guess as to why they did that is they don't have a lot of adoption for their solutions out there, and so because of that, they're pushing it out until they can kind of get somebody, because it's the lion's share of their revenue, right? All advertising, and they can't kind of let that go. And I think they've just got resistance from some of the larger players out there that are coming up with different solutions as to how to let advertisers target users.
So what are some of those solutions, Ron, that you're seeing that's outside of what's currently happening now?
So there's a lot of different types of technology that allow folks to kind of target that. None of them have really caught on. Everything's kind of in an experimental stage. And
Okay.
What we're recommending for brands is really, you need to quit relying on these third-party platforms to hold your data, right? You're letting them own your audiences. And I think what you really want to do is own your own audience, own your own data, right? The regulations that are out there are forcing you to be responsible for that data. The brands like Google and Meta, they're pushing it back on you to be responsible for the data that you collect or share. So why would you rely upon Google and Facebook to own those audiences, to own that data? So we really recommend you should be owning your own data. And the easiest, most straightforward solution there is for the CDP platform. So, and that's really kind of what our recommendation is as to how you do that. Own your own audiences.
I love that idea. And you mentioned some of the regulations that are happening. And can you talk about the analogy that you mentioned at the beginning of our preamble? I thought it was perfect because I think it gives a good visual as to what the privacy is versus what's happening with brands and actually how they actually control their own data.
Sure, and then everybody knows that, it's been the wild, wild west out there with data, right? We've been operating under, what's collected, what's not collected for, the past 30 plus years of the internet. And, so having some sort of rules really just kind of sets the edge of the playing field for us. So everybody kind of understands what they can and cannot do, because right now, and prior to a lot of these things, GDPR is kind of the one that started a lot of this. It was really just wild, wild west. So those regulations are giving us what we can and cannot do, right? They're keeping us and keeping the ball in play, so to speak. And that's really kind of, gives everybody that sort of equal playing field, level playing field, if you will.
I love it. So it's a level playing field, and the privacy laws kind of define the edges of that playing field. But it's kind of like, if any of the guests were fans of Calvin and Hobbes, the comic strip, he had a game called Calvin Ball. And Calvin Ball had no rules. Calvin Ball, the score was Q-3, right? They would have to pick up a flag, they'd have to run around 3 times and then yell a color or a silly sorry song, right? I mean, that's how it played out. And so what I love about that analogy, Ron, about the playing field is that if the privacy laws put the boundaries around the playing field, but then suddenly you have a lot of games on the playing field, some brands are playing different games than others in terms of how they manage their own first party data. And what I think is interesting from a marketing side on that and a behavior side is we're asking the people responsible for the data to watch themselves, to police themselves.
Yes, and I mean, with the laws, and I know we're going to get into those things in a later discussion, but there are fines for not playing, by those rules and keeping those edges, right? So that is, while it's self-policing and there's things that you're supposed to do, if you really kind of flip it on its head, and this is really about consumer rights, and the ability for the consumer to actually own their data or have a say in how their data is used, because there is no say in how data is used. People were just farming data and then selling it for a good profit. And a lot of these regulations are based upon how much money do you make on selling data, because there's lots of firms that is their biggest money maker is selling data. Ever applied for a mortgage and then get all this junk mail? That's the same thing. It's been happening for decades and decades of selling data. It's not just the internet was not the new way to do this. It was the fastest way to do this.
Sure. And I think what's happening also from a consumer behavior standpoint is we're becoming more aware, I think of our own data privacy, and I think there are more tools out there to do so. So LastPass or 1Password are these apps that consumers can have to increase some of the security that they have. Also, by doing some ad blocking, they can create that sense of privacy if they don't want to see the ads, or of course taking that step to opt out. What I find just so fascinating as a statistic that reveals consumer preferences is that 80% are asking apps not to track what they do. So to me, that shows that people want to be more in control of who's getting what kind of data.
Yeah, and the way you phrase that, I can tell you're an iPhone user, right?
Yes.
And the way that that Apple implemented iOS and the way they phrased it, I mean, who the hell would actually opt in, right? It sounds absolutely nasty as to what somebody could do. And they're not phrasing it in what advertising's supposed to be doing, which is, hey, we want to show you relevant information and advertisement for these free applications that you are using, and this will make your life improve because you're only getting stuff that's good for you. And in verse, it sounds like, hey, we're going to have you give up your firstborn because we can track you via these apps. It's really scary, right? And I think there needs to be some sort of medium, and I'm not sure that was, I'm sure, deliberate by Apple. I'm not convinced that they're not putting out their own advertising platform, and it's why they're kicking everybody else off of their platform and their iOS platform so that they can then put in more advertising, and they do have some of that going instead. Why are they giving up all that money to Facebook? Why are they giving the money up to Google, etc.?
Sure. No, actually, I think it's really insightful, Ron, that you talk about it, because the phrase they use is track. Very few people want to be tracked. However, some people will want to find relevant advertising that's appropriate to them. I'd love to switch gears a little bit to think about some of the consumer behavior on connected TV and some of the data that can be relevant or not relevant to connected or advanced TV. I'll give you a good example. I was visiting my daughter, and my daughter and her boyfriend are both graduate students. They're in graduate school, etc. But they were getting connected TV ads for a college, and to get an online degree. And I was like, wow, really interesting, because that's clearly a wasted spend to that household. So the question that I would have for you from a data side is, data attributes like education and income, demographics, gender, age, these are all readily available data profiles of people in terms of their behavior and usage. And is it possible to still have that be private and anonymous to the individual, but scoop in all those relevant characteristics so that you're targeting more effectively?
I think the promise and where the industry is going is really around the, groups or cohorts, right? So instead of understanding that, I am a bald white male in my 50s,
with the beard of Zeus,
they're going to be looking for, males in their 50s, and it's not just me. I'm belonging to a group. I've got certain characteristics with those other males in their 50s, right? And I think that's where this is really kind of almost going a little bit backward from the, kind of like penultimate of being able to, advertise directly to Chris Foster. I'm looking at a lot of Chris Fosters. And so that's, I think, where we're heading and what a lot of the technology is going to go. Now, some of these technologies that are out there are getting a little bit more where I can still get back to Chris, but you have a little more control. It's a little bit more privilege. It's a little bit more permission based. But those things are not catching on right now. They're in their infancy, and we'll see how those things play out. We don't have a solution from Google. It's still in the works.
It's still in the works. And what I think that's interesting is segmentation profiles have been around a very long time. From the earlier data houses, whether it's Personix or Connects, where clusters, and I remember in the Wayback Machine, Claritas had, the shotguns and pickup trucks, or velvet, furs and Volvos, and they would group characteristics together. I would think, though, that now that's a way to, again, play Calvin ball within the bounds of privacy, trying to look at user behavior, purchase behavior, online behavior, various website visiting behavior. And I know the technology exists to be able to look at where someone has been from various URLs and kind of project and predict where they're going to go. And that creates those groups or those cohorts without necessarily violating privacy.
You're absolutely right, and I think that's really the kind of influence of artificial intelligence, right? We're really getting that as being and filling in those gaps, and some place like Google already does that. They use artificial intelligence a lot to basically predict what those conversions are, predict what those attributes of a specific user, even though they have 2 attributes, they'll predict another 6 or 8 attributes to be able to group or make those cohorts. That's happening kind of across the playing field. Because we have so much data, we do have behavioral data collected from website visits and things like that. They're using that to predict, how to put those cohorts together as to what somebody will do or won't do, or what will like or what won't like. So that's where we're getting, without all of the data, we're able to kind of build those things. But artificial intelligence is helping quite a bit in that area.
I think I'm so glad you touched on that, Ron, because it's almost what I love about human beings is our ability to adjust and adapt to challenges and obstacles, right? If they say necessity is the mother of invention, and with data privacy rules kind of clamping down, advertisers and marketers are like, well, we've got this piece of data, we've got this piece of data, I've got this piece of data, I'm having a hard time connecting it in scale. So we create artificial intelligence algorithms to do that work for us. So instead of having pinpoints of light that are disparate stars, brands and agencies are able to create a constellation. And AI is what helps to draw those constellations together.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I can't, talk about AI without giving a little bit of forewarning, right? We've got, laws coming into effect for AI coming out of, and again, Europe leading those things, right? And it's, we've got this, a DALL-E image creator that's been in the news here over the past month of being able to kind of just write a sentence and it creates a believable looking image. And they've held back on it. And, I think that's OpenAI who has that. But, we have other folks that don't maybe have as big a data set to draw from are now just putting this out there. And so now you can just start, writing sentences that will create believable looking images. And there's a lot of danger in that, because there are even some of the examples I've seen of, images created of Obama. And so, there's kind of these deep fakes we're talking about and things like that. All of those possibilities of what you can do with images from AI, right? So what happens when AI is able to guess almost everything about you, Chris, without actually all of your data being there?
Right. No, that's
how invasive is that?
That's a great point. Again, I think that we're not going to talk legally, but that skirts within that boundary of privacy, right? That's that open playing field of Calvin ball that we were just talking about. I also know that there are brands using AIs to predict graphic design and imagery and advertising that will most likely get a response. And so it's generating or measuring out, the way you might track or respond to an ad with text. They're saying, how are people going to respond to these images? How are they going to respond to this creative? And AI is being used for those kind of predictive models too.
We've been using something like that for years at Red Door, and we've done it. We can feed any digital image in it, and we use it to look at websites we develop, and are the calls to action in the right place? Are they going to catch their eye? What does somebody look at first? What's the area around there that people's eyes are really drawn to? And we've done that to optimize people's offline menus in a retail like fast food chain, so they can put, quite honestly, where your eye goes the most profitable menu item on the list. Those things are there. They want you to look at those things. I'm not saying that's a bad idea. They're in business. They're there to make profit. They want your eye drawn to that. You still have the choice whether to do it or not. They're just trying to make sure you notice it.
Yeah, and also too, what I like about that analogy, Ron, is that, or that story, actually, not an analogy, the story, is that that's within the privacy laws. That's fine. What it does is it shows that there's again, that boundary, the playing field is where you can be most creative without kind of getting across those edges. And human beings as consumers, we're trying to be as protective and as mindful as we can, and brands and advertisers and businesses are trying to be as persuasive as possible so that they can sell product, which is what we're supposed to do in our advertising industry. That's wonderful. We are already at 11:20. It's just bam. John, Tom, do we have questions from the audience?
We do have some questions, and time does fly when you're having fun. You guys did a great job. Thank you. Here's the first one for you. Although they keep kicking the can down the road, when is Google actually going to get rid of cookies? Do we have a timeline on that?
Yeah, they've now kicked it to the latter half of 2024. It was the latter half of 2023, and now it's the latter half of 2024. And I've been talking to folks and saying they had a 2-year window at the beginning, of this year to kind of get things in place to deal with this. And so while you now have 3 years, folks are still terribly, terribly far behind. I'm really putting in solutions to deal with the fact that advertising will be less effective. In the sense of being able, because you won't have the third-party cookies to understand who somebody is that's visited other websites and now visits your website.
Thanks, Ron. That's actually good feedback. I wonder if it actually will happen in 2024, if they'll kick the can again.
Like I said, I said I was disappointed when they did that. They can't continue to do that because these other technologies that are out there are going to start eating into their kind of like market space, and people and all we need is something that a lot of bigger brands are going to believe in, that is safe for their brands, safe for their consumers, and that'll start stealing some of Google's kind of market share. I think it was a mistake by them. We'll see. I mean, they're still the 800-pound gorilla. But I'm more like, let's rip this Band-Aid off.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. Here's another cookie question for you. Every website now has an accept or do not accept cookie prompt. Do you have any info or insight on how end users and consumers are responding to that prompt? And part 2 of this question, how are those responses affecting the marketers, brands, and websites that have those prompts?
Yeah, great question. And it is ubiquitous now. I mean, it's almost becoming noise on a website, whether it's there or not. And we do a lot of user testing. What that means is that, we actually recruit folks to come onto a website. We give them a script or a task, what to complete. And then there's a video. We see the screen and we see their mouse, and they're supposed to kind of be talking. So we get the audio also. So user testing has given us some feedback on that. And what we're finding really interesting is that people are ignoring those things. They're not committing one way or nothing. They're just leaving it there. And maybe that's just because they're doing this. It's not about that. But, I find that, a lot of the folks within our marketing company are starting to accept. And I'm super, super like data privacy. I'm starting to accept more of folks, being able to cookies. I basically say do not share. But if they need to set cookies and track, that's okay. I don't mind being tracked. I don't really look at ads, which is kind of a funny thing saying being a marketer, but I want to see relevant ads if I do kind of scan over them.
Yeah, that's actually great feedback, Ron. Thank you for that. I got another question here for you, and I think it's kind of a third party versus first party, and we touched a little bit about this on the beginning of our conversation today. The question says, can you talk a little bit more about the tools and platforms that are out there that may help companies more effectively build and manage first-party data versus having to deal with third-party data?
Yeah, and the CDP, consumer data platform, that's the best kind of type of platform to handle first-party data. It's secure. It's meant to handling all of that sort of data. It's meant to connecting to all your different data sources and then pushing out and activating on that data. It's the right platform to kind of head for that. To kind of handle that situation. Also, in regards to some of this, kind of how we're handling data right now and how we're getting around things like iOS, because one of the things that they came out with iOS 14 was that they took even first-party cookies and said, hey, it's only good for 24 hours or 7 days. And so really where you can set cookies to last forever, now all of a sudden they're just gone. And so I visit a website one day and then visit the next day, they might be seen as a new user. So that's for what we call kind of front end or browser cookies. But what you do have, if you use server-side analytics or implementation, you can actually set kind of server cookies on somebody's browser, and that they don't have any control of. iOS can't make sure that something's only there for 24 hours, or you can kind of get a restore, and so you still have kind of first-party cookies in that instance, and third-party cookies for that matter too.
Ron, you always bring the quality insight. Thank you for that. Let me jump back in here. I think it's time to wrap this up. I'll bring myself back on screen. There I am. Ron, Chris, another fabulous session together. Thank you so much. A really, truly great conversation. I think we could have gone on for a full hour, and the 20 minutes did fly by in a blink of an eye. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. Before we close out, I'd like to take a moment to invite everyone to join us for our next episode of the PDMI Take 20, which will be hosted on Wednesday, August 31st at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. I'd also like to remind you that PDMI's Fall Conference, PDMI West, will be scheduled October 24th through 26th in San Diego at the Hard Rock Hotel. Registration is open. If you have not yet done so, please get your badge. Hotel rooms are going fast. In fact, the block will be closed on September 23rd or when it sells out, whatever comes first. So don't miss out on your possible discounted rooms. If you would like to get more information on badges and or hotel rooms, please visit thepdmi.com. That's thepdmi.com. Thanks again, everyone. Glad to have you with us today, and make it a great day.
Thank you.